I want to talk about representative democracy. There's a disconnect between what the voters of America want and what our policymakers want. About 60% of people think that the government should guarantee that everyone in the country has health care. 60% of people believe in stricter gun control laws, with around 90% of people supporting universal background checks. About 60% of people believe in regulation that makes power plants in America get to zero carbon emissions by 2040. And while only slightly above half, 51% of Americans support DEI policies, around 60% of Americans support the individual values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. About 60% of Americans believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases. And over 80% of Americans believe the minimum wage should be higher. And yet none of those things have any policy that has enacted them. Why do you think that is? When people say we live in a democracy and so your voice gets heard, I'm always like, when did I get to vote on universal health care, abortion, or minimum wage? And the answer is, I didn't, because we don't live in a democracy, we live in a representative democracy, which means that instead of voting on every single issue that comes our way, we elect representatives to go fight those battles for us. I don't think that representative democracy in and of itself is inherently bad. The problem is they are not enacting policy that represents the interests of their constituents. They are enacting policy that represents the interests of the rich people and the large corporations and the political action committees that can buy their opinions. And so if you want policymakers who represent the interests of the people that voted those policymakers into office to represent their interests, you have to make it so that they are not allowed to profit off of representing interests of anyone but the people that voted for them. The statistics in general support this. There was a 2014 study that looked at 2,000 pieces of legislation and the accompanying public opinion surveys that went with those pieces of legislation, and found that as you approach 0% public support for a piece of legislation, there's about a 30% chance that that legislation gets enacted anyways. And to make matters worse, as you approach 100% public support, that number is still 30%, meaning public opinion has no sway at all on whether a piece of policy gets enacted. Now, if you filter that public opinion survey by what they refer to as the economic elites, which is the rich people and the large businesses, as you approach 0% public support from economic elites, there's about a 10% likelihood that that bill gets enacted anyway. And as you approach 100% support from economic elites, there's about a 60% chance that that legislation gets passed. And so if you want policymakers who represent your interests, you have to put regulation, and you can see the rant I have on regulation, you have to regulate policymakers so that they can't use their station to increase their individual net wealth. Otherwise, large companies and rich people will continue to be able to buy policy in this country.